Yo. 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 Oh my god. Oh my god.
This was my reaction to the first time I got the platform to balance the ball for more than 2 seconds. Believe it or not, I've been working on this project off and on for the past 4 months. And even though there have already been several videos made on this exact project, I still struggle to develop my own program and physical design for the robot. However, ultimately I prevailed, and now I'm going to give a detailed description of how the robot works. Before I get started, here are some people who were crucial to the success of this project. Firstly, Aid Musa. I think I'm saying that correct. He was the first video I saw that inspired me to make my own ball balancer. As you can see, many of my design considerations were inspired by his design. Lastly, Angela Sodman, who posts videos on YouTube about all things required to understand the movement of robots. In particular, her videos on inverse kinematics. Alrighty, with all that other stuff out of the way, let's get started. In order to understand the way the robot works, we need to define some parameters for what we need our robot to do. In other words, we need the platform robot to be able to move in 2 different ways, one of which is a pitching motion and the other which is a rolling motion. This here is the pitching motion, and this here is the rolling motion. I also just want to mention quickly that from this point on in the video, I bring up inverse kinematics a lot. That's just a fancy word for equations that describe the movement of a robot. Okay, so our inverse kinematic equation, which we'll take a look at in a second, takes 2 angles as input, and the equation spits out leg lengths to achieve those desired orientations of the platform. So we're going to have 2 angles. One is going to be the pitch, which will move the ball in the X direction towards the center of the platform, and then another one is going to be the roll, which in this case we'll call phi, and that's going to move the ball in the y direction towards the center of the platform. Now, as I just said, our inverse kinematic equation spits out a leg length that looks something like this. It's going to be a straight line from top to bottom here. Now, in the actual robot design, we don't have a leg that runs straight up and down like this. We have 2 legs, one extending from the shaft of the motor out like this, and then we have another pin joint here that goes up and connects to the platform itself. So we'll call our 2 real legs A and B, and we'll call the imaginary leg that we get from the inverse kinematics output C. As you can tell, this creates a triangle, and through the law of cosines we can solve for angles in that triangle. In particular, we're trying to find this one here. So in order to do that, we can use this equation here. This is the law of cosines equation, and then we can solve for the angle, which is the cosine of C. That's the angle that we're trying to find. So solving for that angle, we get, and there you have it. That is how you find the angle. Okay, so I'm going to give a very, very, very brief overview of the inverse kinematics at the risk of making this video super boring. All that you need to know is that this is where our angle inputs come from. So this is what's called a rotation matrix. And the reason we use the rotation matrix is because the platform frame rotates independently of the base frame. And so we need to account for that change in angle in the platform frame as it stretches our leg vector out. So this equation up here at the very top that says Li is equal to T plus BRP times Bi minus Bi. Li is your leg vector. Okay, I think that's enough of that. If you guys are actually interested in solving the inverse kinematics, all the information that you need is up on screen right now. And if you want a more comprehensive review, then I will leave some links to websites that go fully in depth to the inverse kinematics, and even a link to a research paper that I found that has more than enough information to build a ball balancer. Just to verify that the inverse kinematics were correct, I went ahead and made a Python program that simulated them using the VPython library. So we've got our platform and it looks something like this. And we want to know what the leg vector should be, let's say, if we're not even accounting for the ball's velocity, let's just say we're accounting for the position of the ball. If the ball is right here, well then both our theta and our phi are going to be pretty big because it's at the edge of the platform. We want our ball to move here. So the pitch and roll are going to be relatively high. If it's closer, if the ball's like somewhere over here, our theta and our phi are going to be lower than they would be here because we don't want the ball moving a bunch. We don't want the platform to be at some steep angle like this. If the ball's already at the center, we don't want that. We want the platform to be almost leveled out. And so the way that we do this is we map the ball's position on the platform in both the X and the Y directions. Okay, so now for the PID part of this video. So we need to explain what a PID controller is and how I used it in this project. So PID stands for proportional integral derivative. And it sounds a lot fancier than it really is. But in this case, we have our platform and we have this bit here. We have the center dot right there. Now we would say that any deviation from this point, if our ball is right here, we're going to call this distance, which is going to have some X and Y value. We're going to call that distance the error, which is essentially the error from the desired set point or where we want the ball to be. So if the ball is at the center, then the error is 0. The ball's at the very edge, well, it's got some X error, and it's got some Y error. Okay, so that is our proportional term. Proportional term is just the error, which is the distance of the ball from the center. Now next, we've got our integral term. So this is what our integral term looks like. Now I don't understand, Mason, what does that even mean? The integral term is the accumulation of error over time. So it basically sums up our error as the program moves along, as the ball moves along through time. Now the reason this is important is because we might be able to get the ball to a stop. We might also be able to get the ball very close to the center. Might be able to get the ball very close to the center, but not quite at the center. So there, as you can see, our ball is pretty close to the center, but it's not actually in the center. Well, what our integral term will do is it will accumulate this tiny little error right here that our program might not initially realize is problematic. It'll sum over that error, so we'll say error times time is equal to our I term. Now, as time goes on, as t gets bigger, our integral term is going to get bigger, and our program is going to realize, oh shoot, the ball is not where it needs to be. Let's nudge it over a little bit so that it sits in the center of the platform, right? Because we want it to sit in the center of the platform. Okay, and then finally for the D term, the coolest term, the derivative term. The derivative term is the instantaneous velocity of the ball. D is equal to error minus the previous error divided by some delta t or dt. Taking calculus, this probably sounds a little bit familiar, right? So we've got the ball, let's say, is sitting here. Now, if this ball travels a really big distance, in other words, if d is really big and delta t is constant, delta t does not change. So if d gets really big, then that means that our derivative term is going to get really big. And in turn, overall PID output to get bigger. Now, when the PID output gets bigger, the angles theta and phi increase. In other words, the platform gets steeper, which makes sense because as the error goes to 0, that means the ball itself is sitting somewhere in the middle of the platform. As the error goes to 0, the ball is getting closer and closer to the center of the platform. So if the error is 0, then the PID output is 0, and the angle of the platform is 0. Now, if the output of the PID controller is high, then theta and phi are high. And chances are, if the PID output is high, either 1, the ball is on the edge of the platform. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that the ball has a really high velocity. It's moving really fast, right? Now, that's another possibility. We need the platform to be angled up so that it doesn't roll off the platform.
Now, there's some things I left out here, like tuning your PID gains, which is honestly the main part. The hardest part of making a PID controller is finding which gains work the best. But this video is already getting long, so let's just skip to the finished product.